I'm Lucienne Binet. I know most of you, but maybe not all of you, and I'm president of the Community Association here in Haiku this year. And I want to thank my board members, a number of whom are here. I see Phil and Loff and Tim are here. Any other board members show up yet? Well, anyway, I thank them all because we agreed to co-sponsor this event with the Community Water Authority, and we have been doing all kinds of fun things to help them understand a little bit more about the Haiku Huelo watersheds and streams today, going out holo holo, checking out the land itself. Direct Aina experience today. I also want to thank Tim Wolf, who's given us our sound and our AV. Yeah, yay, Tim. I want to thank Akaku for making sure that other people on Maui can see this, I'm sure, world-shattering meeting that we're going to have tonight. If it's not world-shattering, at least it's going to be sincere. It's going to be the real deal about what folks here in the Huelo and Haiku area are thinking. And I'd also like to thank Christine Kozuki, our project manager here for the Community Association, because she coordinated all the cows. So that's what it took to make this all happen. And I'd like to thank Gina Young and the board members of the Community Water Authority, the East Maui Community Water Authority. We have a number of those very, very expert, dedicated board members here tonight. Thank you guys for showing up, meeting after meeting. And we also have the work of Shay Chan Hodges, Stacy Alapai, oh shoots, I'm going to start forgetting names, but Lilila Davis, who all helped coordinate and put all these pieces together. And last but not least, we have our very special guests, the folks from the Public Finance nonprofit. And I'm going to let them all introduce themselves because get plenty of them, you know. We got about 6 or 7 of these guys. And they all just have wonderful things to offer our community. So listen up. We're going to have a couple different parts here. I went to the KNI meeting on, was it Monday night? Yeah, Monday night. And wow, you know, just great to hear from our brothers and sisters there in the KNI Wailuanui Nahiku area. And sure sounded like we were sitting right around our own tables, the things they cared about, you know, Malama, take care of the watershed, Kuleana, you know, really take responsibility, find the best ways to bring fairness to sharing water, all these things that are near and dear to our hearts. So we're going to have a chance, after our brief introduction here, to have a little sit down with folks in the community, all of you, in some separate areas. And I'm going to be facilitating one of them over in that corner there, and just hear from you, your ideas. There were some great ideas out there, KNI. I'm sure there were some great ideas in Kula. People really want to see us cooperate with the natural cycles of things. I know that's a big desire here too. When we get plenty of rain, let's have some way to store it, you know. Let's encourage folks to have more catchment and maybe share their catchments with others so that, you know, if one person doesn't have water, maybe, you know, they can tap into someone else's bigger catchment system. We've got to cooperate with these changing weather patterns. We all see they're changing. All of us old timers and all the Kama'aina certainly know they are changing. So some of you may have heard about the East Maui Community Water Authority. Has everyone heard about it? Anyone who hasn't heard about it, raise your hand. Oh, so educated. Very good. Well, you know, in 2022, a charter amendment was passed, but this charter amendment was passed because for years people are going, hey, don't we have it backward? How comes the county has to beg for water from this big sugar company? Isn't that water come from state land? It's like, shouldn't the roles be reversed? Shouldn't the county be, you know, fairly distributing the water to themselves and others? And so finally someone did something about it, and that someone was our county council with a lot of leadership from the Board of Water Supply, which Shea Chan Hodges actually happened to chair at that time. They set up a little group and they said, hey, let's study how this could happen. They made a report to the county council. Council member Sinensi, who represents part of our district here, it was his committee. He said, okay, let's learn about this. And he invited all kinds of experts. And Shea was very, very instrumental in helping connect him with people are doing this all over the country. People are managing their own water supply that comes from public lands, even if in the past it was managed by some other private entity. So we are not like, just like making stuff up here. We are on a trajectory that is happening all over our nation. And we'll hear a few stories from some of these folks here tonight, too, about what's happening in the communities either they live in or that they visit. And so there's just lots of new things to learn, and I'm looking forward to it. And of course, you guys are the key. People in Haiku have lots of good ideas. We hear them at every community association meeting. A few of them we try to make into reality, but we're chipping away at it. And this is one more time that we will take some baby steps towards a very, very different reality for the future, towards bringing public water under public management, and hopefully management that's really guided by the deepest knowledge of the generations that have lived here, generation after generation. These folks know something, and they should have an important voice. And on the Community Water Authority, that's who serves. It's that voice is on that board. It's the only board I know of in Maui that's set up that way. So we got to do everything we can to let that succeed. And our input tonight is part of that. This won't be the first time we hear from the Community Water Authority. They want to be very to our community. They want to know what we're thinking. They want to visit the watershed more. They're only just beginning. So this is the beginning of something wonderful, something I think very meaningful for all of us. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Gina. And Gina, you can take it from here. Gina Young, the Executive Director, County Executive Director of the East Maui Community Water Authority. Welcome.
Thank you, Lucienne. Thank you. We wouldn't be here without Lucienne, honestly, and Shea as well. So it all started in this community, getting that charter amendment on the ballot. So I'm going to go ahead and just give you, I updated you folks not too long ago, but I'm going to go ahead and just give you a quick overview of who we are and what we're doing. So Tim's going to pull it up here in a second. And Lucienne did a great job of explaining how our evening's going to go. So I want to thank everybody for coming and for caring about your community. Sometimes you really can make things happen, and that's what we're in the process of doing. So I'm going to start by explaining that we are a county department. We are called the East Maui Water Authority. It's unusual that our board started before us, so often we get confused with the name of our community board. Is there a clicker, Tim, or do I?
Yeah, it should be right there on the podium.
Oh, hidden away. Does it need to get turned on? Oh. Hold on a second. We're going to get ourselves organized. I could probably go through this off the top of my head, but you probably want the visuals. Well, I'll just start with the first few. We are a county department. We are actually embedded within the framework of the county, which is great because we have all the resources and all the knowledge that comes with being a county department. But we're also doing things a little bit differently in that we have a community board that helps us with our mission, which is right in the charter to acquire and manage the water system and to develop and implement a watershed plan. Two really very clear directives that we have that you voters approved. So I'm Gina. She already introduced me. We have a staff of 4. 2 of them started the last 3 weeks. So we've gone from 2 to 4. So we're just getting started and we're really excited. I do have 2 of them here. Leslie Tamarabuchi, who you met when you came in. She's right behind you. And then she's our grant coordinator. And Serena Fukushima is our information education community liaison. too. So I'm glad I hope you folks got to meet them when you came in. And then coming up, we're going to have a water resource specialist person, and that person will be in charge of all the watershed work that we do and coming up with a plan. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. And then council gave us 2 watershed workers in this county budget cycle. So that's really exciting. And I'll talk about that in just a minute. So here's our board. It's kind of an older picture. Former Mayor Alan Arakawa. He had to resign for personal reasons. So we do have a board seat open for the upcountry area ag seat right now. And in the room, we have a couple board members that I want to point out. We have Moses Bergau came out from the Haiku. Lurlyn Scott, who doesn't even need to raise her hand. Everybody knows her. And then Moses Kahiamoy also came today. Thank you. Am I missing anybody? Any board members come in? Okay, great. So the name, I just wanted to explain, one of the great things the board does is they integrate Hawaiian knowledge and practices. So the first thing they did is they came in and renamed the board to be more reflective of what the work that they're doing. So they are the Ahavai Maui Hikina. And what we're doing here with this series of community meetings is we're working to unite the different communities. In the past, they've been pitted against each other, and that's been a tactic, but you guys all share the experience of having a lack of water. And you're also really effective communities, KNI, Kula, and Haiku Huelo. So you also provide really important perspectives about how to do this work. We want to develop a new system and not just replace the old system. So we want a system that's going to have an awareness of the impacts on the watershed and the water user communities. And we're doing it from a Ho'oponopono Ka'aina and community concept where we want to acknowledge the past. Only by doing that can we move forward. And we want to create community benefits through using water and water management. And we're working, we just hired Kepa Maui, if any of you know him. He's an excellent cultural resource who did interviews with Kapuna from the area from 1910 to 1930. So he's going to go through those interviews in his other library of translated documents and provide us information about what was the watershed like at the time and give us some tools, some real practical tools that we can use. And I hope to have him come out and do a community meeting as well and share all his information. We also want to do a system that promotes equitable distribution. Lucienne talked about that, and I think your community knows all too well what it feels like to be on the other side of that. And that recognizes the benefits of meeting your community's water needs and the role that you play in food security. A lot of food gets grown out here. And if you had more water, what would you do with it? You might build some housing for your family. So there was a survey that was sent out, and I hope you folks can go back and look at your emails or get on the Haiku Community Association and let us know about what your water needs are. How have you been impacted by diversions? If you had more water, what would you do with it? Shay Chan Hodges is going to report on some of the results that we've had so far. We're also working with the County Maui Department of Agriculture on their food security plan too. We want to really document the food that's being produced out here and how stream water really helps local farmers. And we also want to have island-wide economic benefits, and then we want to create long-term water security. We're seeing in Lahaina now what it looks like, what the forefront of climate change looks like, and how we're really we're being forced now to prioritize what our needs are and really take a look at what the larger conversations are around housing and our economy, and really accepting the fact that we are in an era of climate change. And with that comes a responsibility to manage your resources. And we want to directly, mitigate, capitalize on our new climate, and that comes with these catching, what Lucienne talked about with catchment and storage, and really capturing some of these high episodics, being responsible with our ditches and tunnels and lining them, upgrading our infrastructure, and then being understand with data collection what's really happening. And I know this association is done lots of data collection too, and we hope to maybe work with some of that data and make it a little more meaningful. And then our board also came and developed a motto for both the board and the department too. And that motto really reflects the resource that we are managing. It talks about how water literally is the tears from heaven and what a precious resource that is, and that we really need to treat it as such. And we need to be doing it with you folks and engaging you and partnering with the community. That's how we got here. That's how we got the charter amendment passed. And it's the only way we're really going to be able to move forward. So you'll see more of me, and we hope to figure out other ways too that we can continue to get your mana'o as we move forward. And we'll let you know when we need your help too. That'll come at the end of the year in December when we go back to the State Board of Land and Natural Resources. We are in discussions with Mahi Pono EMI. We're just in the early stages. That's led by Mayor Bisson. Our DWS and the managing director are both our partners. We're working hard to reframe those discussions so that we can look at the historical impacts, awareness, equitable outcomes, and bring that finally into the discussion. And when we have something, we'd like to come back out to you. But tonight, when we do the community engagement, if you have any thoughts now about that, please give it to us so we can document it and record it, what you'd like to see come out of that. We have already heard we'd like a new way of doing things. We don't want to just replace one landlord for another landlord. So we need your knowledge and priorities. We're just beginning the watershed plan, so we want to collect your information so we know what priorities for the plan, what kind of programs we can use, and then we're going to use it to assist with grant funding. So it's going to have a lot of descriptive information about your community, which will be really exciting to pull that together too. And we want it to be culturally rooted. And I've talked a little bit about that. We want to use the Ike Kapuna, the ancestral knowledge. We want to use traditional sustainable practices and really communicate to everybody how meaningful it is to Malama, your watershed, and what that does and how it can help communities really thrive and increase the well-being of that. And then we want it to be community-based too. And we're also focusing on the lower elevations. We know the state does the top of the mountain, and the communities are most impacted by the lower areas. So that's where we're going to focus our energy. And it's one thing to do a plan, it's another thing to implement it. So we do have these positions coming up, but we also want to partner with the communities and get staff out here in the communities, a base yard equipment, opportunities for the community, job opportunities. And we've already identified some easy work with, I think you guys already know this, but we want to hear tonight about what do you think are the priorities and how is Huelo different? I do want to talk about our limitations, especially geographically. By the charter, we cover the water collection areas that are in the state license. So it's Nahiku, Honolulu, KNI, and Huelo. So those are the areas that will be doing the watershed work. And our jurisdiction is surface water from East Maui. So I know there's a lot of water needs, a lot of infrastructure, but DWS is a partner too. So we're responsible for looking at the East Maui surface water and bringing it around to DWS too. So that's what our kuleana is. And we can partner with DWS and encourage them to do things, but we don't have jurisdiction for reservoirs near Kamoli. They're actually working on that right now, and I'm sure you've heard about that from them. So this is our series. These are our goals. It'll be posted on the wikiwy.org. It's a great resource that's also come out of this community. And then, I guess it was 2 days ago in KNI, Lucienne talked a little bit about what the community input came from there. And there was a lot of acknowledgement about the damage that's been done, and a desire to pass on knowledge to the keiki too, just like it was done for people there. So that's something that we're going to want to work on. And then job opportunities and community benefits and what that would look like. So we'll start to focus on that and think about how we can develop those kind of programs. And I know that PFI can help us with better understand how to do that. So last night in Kula, we heard a lot about a lack of good water infrastructure too. So that was important. We also asked them about what are their needs and what would they do with the water that they have. And I'm going to turn it over to Shay Chan Hodges. And she's going to present let me tell you real quick about our public finance initiative. There are partners They're going to talk after Shay, and they're going to be the ones to do community engagement, to lead it, and then they're going to have an expert panel after that and provide you all with some really good information that they've been helping us understand. So we've adopted Shay for with helping us, and she's going to talk about some of the survey results.
You have one more slide, because you didn't want to see that one, huh?
Questions?
Oh, just one more slide, but it's okay. Hi, everyone. I think I know most of you. I'm Shay Chan Hodges, and we did a survey. We only have 17 responses so far, so we'd love to get more input. And is it coming up, Tim? Okay. So first of all, we'd love to get a lot more responses. If you didn't get the email, you can also get it at the wikivi.org site and just go to the Haiku side of it, and you can fill it out. And then I was just going to give some quick highlights in a second.
Shay, while we're waiting, I'd like to say just one thing. Sure. A lot of the folks here actually live in the Haiku area, and so they're not technically in the lease area, but they may have family members who are. They may have family members that live here or throughout Haiku or nearby. But I think that their input is valuable in just what they experience as people who live the closest
Yep.
to the lease area in Honolulu.
Yeah, that's a good point.
You know, whether your home is there or not.
Yeah, and
Is important.
actually, that's a good point.
Going swimming in the pool at Twin Falls or, whatever it is, all of that means something. And I think knowing about what people in Haiku are facing is
So,
also important for us to capture, even though it's not going to be maybe part of this official watershed plan. We're not two things
right,
apart by a knife.
that's a good point.
We're Hamakua with one moku, and I think we just can't just
There we go.
the imaginary lines be the only things we talk about.
Yeah, and that's actually a good point because I did want to make the point. So this survey, we put it together a few weeks ago. If people have input and want to think there should be other questions asked, please definitely let us know. And a lot of these were very Huelo focused, very do you live on a stream kind of focus. So for example, I live right by the community center. I didn't even want to answer it because those things don't really affect me, but there may be other questions that we should be asking. So for sure, and I'm just going to go through this real quick. So basically, we asked which of the following best describes the current state of the watershed, and it's a little funky because the way the Google Docs did it, I had to kind of add in some of the words, but you can see that the watershed needs major improvements and the Huelo area needs modification of diversions were the two primary things. And again, it's 17 people, so it's probably not statistically super relevant. Oh, am I going the wrong way? Sorry. Okay. So then we asked people to elaborate, and again, I'm not going to go through and read everything. I just wanted to give you folks an idea of what we were asking, but you can see there's issues related to rainfall, more water storage is needed, diversion should be removed, and actually, am I going the right way here? Yes. No, going the wrong way. Okay. Sorry, there's more here. County should claim eminent domain. A lot of things to do with climate change, restoring stream flow. I cannot remember which way to go. Okay. Do you or your family use nearby streams? So that was 53% of the people who answered. And then cultural uses, would they change if there were less stream diversion? So you can see people had a lot of answers related to that. And more cultural uses for sure if they had more access to water. So a lot of these are long, and I don't want to read through all of them, but I just wanted to give you guys an idea what the questions are. Any other comments on water quality or flow? So people had a lot of things that they had specific things to say. And I think it's really important, again, that we get a lot more people to answer this and we get more feedback on what the questions should be. And then which of the following watershed health improvements? And again, you can see the majority were related to water collection. Removal of invasive species was obviously really important to a lot of people. Have any stream diversions affected you or your property? You can see that kind of half-half here. If they have impacted your property, what streams? Do you know what the streams are, what the stream names are? Have you been impacted by stream diversion either positively or negatively? So we didn't see a lot of positive impacts from stream diversion. Not too surprising. There's a big one about the negative impacts. How would your family use additional stream water? And I thought that was really interesting. Care of the land, growing food, growing other agriculture. And that's it. So we had a couple more questions than that, but we'd love to get more feedback, more input on it, and we need a lot more answers. And again, especially if you're not a Huelo person or you're not on a stream and you think there's questions that should have been asked, please let us know. So I'm going to introduce Lourdes. Oh, she's right here.
Thank you.
Thank you. And
Great. Well, first of all, we want to thank Gina for the incredible invitation to be here and all of you for joining us this evening. My name is Lourdes German, and while the PowerPoint comes up, I have the privilege of serving as the Executive Director of the Public Finance Initiative. And what do we do and why are we here? So we are a nonprofit, unlike the private consultants that you've worked with. When we show up to do programming like this, we do it because we care about community, we care about place, and we feel that we have expertise that we can unite with yours to help you reach and catalyze the outcomes that you feel are important. We really take a lot of pride as an organization in meeting communities where they are, and when we had the privilege of meeting Shay several years ago through an enormous, wonderful opportunity, we had just an incredible respect for the work that happens here and also the opportunity to make a difference. We're here because Gina has asked us for support and advice in engaging all of you, as we're going to talk about shortly and give you instructions. But as a nonprofit, we also contribute and have contributed funding to this event to make sure we can bring experts together and really do this work on a pro bono basis to support you. So the only outcome that we are seeking this evening is your engagement, to learn from you with humility, and then to share at the second part of our conversation expert-led guidance that can say, once we've heard from you now for 3 days across 3 different communities, how do we help you reach the outcomes you are telling us are important? And in doing that work, I'll start giving you a preview of what you'll see in the slides, but I lead this organization with over 15 years of expertise in the discipline of public finance. And if you don't know what that is, we'll share shortly that it's really about how the money flows in community. When we show up to work, and we've worked with over 476 governments in the United States for the past 3 years across 46 states, as a team that you'll see shortly. Thank you. If you could go to the next slide. Oh, I have the slide advancer. If you could go to the next slide, because it seems to not work. This is our mission and work, is to work with leaders who want to ask different questions, who want to move the envelope, and who believe that when you look at the enormous power in the public purse and the money that's raised in a community and how it can be spent, that we are asking different questions from a value-centered place. And this is the team that does the work. We're very small, and I'll ask the team and experts who are here to stand up just so that you can know who they are and acknowledge them. But we have brought our best to make sure that we can have a really robust conversation this evening. And as I said, the expertise that I bring to this work is for the past 15 years, I thought, public finance for a big chunk of that really was about balancing the dollars and cents on a balance sheet and thinking about solvency. And I'm really privileged at this stage of my career to be able to unite that with the discipline and care to think, well, what if we use that thinking really strategically to catalyze outcomes in a place? So that's what we hope to begin this evening in support of Gina and all of you. And what we're going to do is start by listening. So in the next 15, 20 minutes, we're going to ask you to choose a topic that is most important to you and that you want to discuss related to the watershed. The 4 topics are going to be ideas for the community watershed management plan, mission and values. Group 2, cultural lens and respectful stewardship. Group 3, current needs assessment. What do you think is needed when you think about the future of the watershed in its current state? And then group 4, your lived experience. And as you see, we have 4 different big sheets of paper and flipboards across the room. I'm going to ask you to pick the topic that you want to go to. There's going to be a facilitator who joins you, that's a member of our team or a member of the community or both. They're going to assign a note taker and basically ask a couple questions, engage you in dialogue, and then at the end of the 15, 20-minute period, I will call a time warning, and we're going to ask each person to do something really hard, a recapitulation in less than 2 minutes to basically synthesize what was shared and invite some of you into the conversation. And then you'll take a pause, you'll go back to your seats, and we will share an expert-led dialogue and panel of presentations, and I'll begin sharing, now that we've heard from you, how do we help arm you with knowledge to achieve the outcomes that you want from a standpoint of understanding how public finance can be a catalyst for change, understanding how to think about cultural heritage and indigenous practices that can be centered, understand how beyond today you can center community voice in meaningful ways that continue this process, and also closing out the conversation hearing from some select global lessons where public water systems globally are doing things that could be instructive to you and what we've learned about you. Any questions about that? I am not. I'm from Boston, but I feel like I'm from here, and I wish I was, after seeing this beautiful place. No, our team is not from Maui, so we have come in with a lot of humility to learn and hoping to learn more, but we are not from here. Yes, we're a remote organization with employees that are based in New York, Washington, D.C., and experts who've also come in from Arizona and other parts of the country. No, we're doing this for free and actually have contributed to the event. So we not only covered half of the costs from our own funds because we really believe in the work, but we've donated all of our services. So everything that you see here is sort of a jointly funded effort to make sure that we are supporting Gina and supporting you. And unlike other consultants, when we show up to do the work, we do it because they're projects we care about. And the reason we can do that work, as you'll see in the appendix to the presentation, is because we are philanthropically funded. So we are supported by Bloomberg Philanthropies, the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, the MacArthur Foundation, the Pew Charitable Trust, the Capital One Foundation, many others. We also work with governments, as I said, across the country. All of the work that we do is for free because we have the privilege of funders who believe that in enabling us to do that work, we can help communities make a difference. With the what? We do not. We don't take federal grants at this time. Any other questions? You can ask anything. We love to learn and explain things.
What are the 4 states you haven't worked in?
We were just talking about that last night. I'm going to have to ask Alex, Peter, remind me, please, because we had a map in the presentation that was too tiny.
North Dakota, South Dakota, Alaska, and I cannot tell you the 4th.
Oh, I think that possibly 3, because Kentucky was the other state, but we did a project with just the Louisville metro government, so Kentucky's now in another Kentucky community in our last technical assistance cohort, and we're working on the other 3.
Thank you for answering.
Always. Hey, if there's no question we will leave unanswered, and if we don't know, we'll tell you we don't know, but we'll look for the answer. Any other questions? Because we can't wait to hear from you. All right, so please pick your topic, and then when everybody looks situated, I'll give the time warning, and then we'll kick off. Each person reporting out to remind the group, like, what was the topic of the discussion, and then to go into the 2-minute recapitulation.
Hello, everybody. We're Group 1, and we talked about the community watershed management. So this was really about what is this group's hopes for the future in water management? What are the values that should be at the center? What is the role of the Watershed Management Authority? And what does a healthy watershed look like? And Lawrence is going to report out for us.
Aloha mai kako. Hello, everybody. My name is Lauren. So some things that came up in our discussion, we'll just go through them pretty quickly. Ensure clean water for local island-wide community and drinking water. So that is one of the important visions for this group. Utilizing Kanaka Maoli cultural practices in tandem with environmental conservation efforts. So, you know, we all have learned so much from, you know, Hawaiian elders and Kupuna and a lot of the people from Kenai. I know I've learned a lot from them, and they've been such, so spearheaded this movement over a couple decades now, I believe. And, you know, Kanaka, in Kenai there is lo'i and a lot of taro cultivation. One question that came up was, in the streams that are not cultivated lo'i or taro, can we implement environmental conservation practices that we see effective in the mainland and stuff, where they're talking about, you know, keystone species and native fish, and so that the importance of keeping the water clean and going to the ocean so those species can thrive. Okay. Incentives to plant more native plants. So that was like incentives for property owners, et cetera. And also just more awareness and education around invasive plants that are sold at the airport and stuff like that. To protect watershed, unite different regions, share info, communication, so share info and communication resources. Community engagement, volunteer work days, just, you know, that would be so good, just as much education as possible, hikes and tours of EMI so people can lay eyes on the diversions and the dry streams. Clarity on ownership, and then, you know, a big one here, accountability to Alexander Baldwin. And so that as a vision and a question. All right. Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. Next group. And again, remind everybody what you talked about and then go into the reporting out. Oh, Nia, I think your mic isn't on. Yeah, I'm still not hearing her. There we go.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Nia. We talked about your lived experience, and a number of us actually are from Dorfaith Road, Huelo Valley, Hanahoe Stream, Ulalena. So I felt like it was a really sweet group to talk about the lived experience of that area. We have representatives who are in our small group here, Kanaka Maoli, with over 104 years of generational residence, all the way to the younger generation. We grew up there like within the past maybe 20, 30 years. And Uncle Moki had shared that his family, he's seen some changes. That was the main question we focused on, was kind of like what has changed. And he's seen changes where the stream used to flow, you know, consistently, and his family was able to grow kalo and have lo'i. And I also had shared about how people used to fish there, so there's a lot of just land-based, ana-based mea'ai. But now Hanahoe Stream has been dry, and so we discussed how the stream used to be rushing enough to bring life to that valley, and then with EMI and the diversions, the stream all but dried up. Then they stopped that diversion situation and the water came back. And then within the past maybe 5 to 10 years, and a number of us were thinking about the connection of when Mahi Pono did arrive, then that dried up again. Another topic that came up, of course, was climate change and how the weather patterns have changed, and you know, there's drought as well as diversion. There's also private land ownerships, people that come and buy plots of land and then tell indigenous folks that they cannot come there. And so I feel like the water rights, the rights to access, that people have rights to come, whether it be for recreation, for spirituality, or for subsistence, right, which is indigenous cultural value here in Hawaii, that people can cultivate and acquire food from the land. And there was a time where you didn't need to have to even leave Hawelo to get your needs met. Streams that were flowing are dry. Land below the diversions is dry, and all of us remember when they could like open and close the, you know, like having someone else come and sorry, it is hard to summarize. And then basically at the very end, we just got to, do we want our children to experience this? Which was the next question What kind of relationship do you want future generations to have with the land and with the water? And that's kind of as far as we got. And I think there was a collective sense of almost like imminent grief that that may not be a potential. And so how can we facilitate the health of those streams so that our children can learn how to take care of the land, how to make their own lo'ikalo, how to swim, right? Or even just the sense of spirituality, connectedness, mindfulness, and mental health and wellness that comes from having access to this resource.
Great, thank you.
Before I begin, the number one and number two, I've heard people talk about 100 years, that there's generational knowledge. I just want to introduce my father. He's going to be 10 years short of 100, okay? Come January, he's going to be 90 years old. So when you talk about generational knowledge, they're sitting in the room. Anyway, that's my soapbox. Current needs assessment. So our group went straight for the question of, they need to know where this watershed actually ends up. It seems to go into this vortex of abyss. So does it travel further out to Kihei, to Lahaina, to Kahului? Because we need to know, right? Who is in control of the lease? And so then, what does this lease consist of? Water delivery, flow, the amount? Let's break it down, right? Because they seem to be the control of this water that is free. Identification of each stream that will define its purpose. In the Hawaiian culture, you don't just give somebody a name. It has an actual purpose, spiritual, physical. It's a holistic thing. So we need to know what this stream is by its identification. So then you'll know what we need to do with this stream. We need more storage capacity. So again, we go back to, where does all the water go, right? If we don't have the water, but yet it's still traveling, where does it end up? Better outreach and education for our community, watershed management, annual report card. We gotta know. State by the lease. Just by the lease. State and county must hold accountability on the leasee's infrastructure. Yeah? That's so direly deficient. Prioritize and balance the use of the water. Food security versus growth. We can talk all day long about how we gotta save the water while we're building out homes for people who are not even living here. And then they gotta water their lawn, fire abatement, fill up their pools, whatever the case may be. We gotta look at the growth in Maui. And we gotta really take a hard look at how many more houses we need. Huelo needs to work towards a reliable water source. They're all dried up and they got streams. Reduce the invasives, restore Mauka to Makai, reduce to eliminate spraying. I don't know, I think there was a law that we don't do any more Roundup, but until they use up their inventory, and I don't know how much more inventory they got 10 years later. The keys are accountability and consequences. We can tell them what they cannot do, but what happens when they do it? Do they lose their lease? Do they pay such a huge fine? Do they force them to now report that they went to each section and fixed it? Where's the consequences? So, and funding. Because all what we can ask tonight will not happen if the funding isn't there. So revive our ecosystem first. Okay.
Great. Thank you very much. And I will report out for Group 2. And in Group 2, what we talked about is, with a cultural lens, what are the respectful stewardship practices that we want to think about in connection with the watershed? And the answer was a resounding yes, which will not surprise anyone. It matters to really center those practices, and I will do my best, but ask my group to correct me if I get terms wrong. The most important, several practices, were shared that are really beautiful and inspirational, including, following the moon phases and thinking about how that not only is part of a cultural heritage practice that can inform like a spiritual experience, but also could govern the way we think about planting and replenishment and actually letting the land really both heal and the water and having a symbiotic relationship. Also the concept of maka'aina. I almost got it. Thank you. That also is really grounded in this beautiful notion of what it means to be attentive and to see and to integrate that in the way we think about food, what we eat, and the entire ecosystem that surrounds it and how you value it. We also talked about how you don't go to another person's ahapua without permission, and that really talks about how you have to reflect a spirit of both respect and reciprocity when we think about the really unique nature of the patchwork of how the water system within the watershed is set up with, streams that flow through some state-owned land, private land. And that also raises a challenge, which is when we think about, the second question we talked about is, how do you embed these and other practices that we all know are really important and could come to collective consensus? It's how do you do that when you don't have access and rights to all of the land and water in the same way? And that's something that is a function of the way the system historically has evolved. It's really difficult to change, but if you want to embed collective practices across the board in a way that reflects greater consistency and cohesion, you have to think about that dynamic. And it's going to be tethered to something that many of you and your peers in other meetings have talked about, which is this sense of the private ownership. And what does it mean to be under private control and to move away from that? Because that really seems like at the crux of the issue of how you can fully embed across the spectrum these and other cultural practices that are important. There are other things that mattered, including thinking about, it's not just to be aspirational in talking about this, but we talked about the important role of education, of saying how are these cultural practices being taught to students, to kids in school so that they really hear and embed that in their minds from the beginning. The importance of also reflecting that spirit in community-based projects that bring people together to collaborate around the projects they think are important and within their agency so that community engagement isn't just a conversation, but actually moves towards action. And I think the other really important point that came up of so many that I credit you with sharing with us, with your intergenerational knowledge, is this notion of kapulu. Did I say it right? Yes, kapu. Thank you. Of really thinking about the messiness, where we see consequences that are not what we want for our watershed. How do we address that with a real commitment to change, and also thinking about the entire ecosystem as a whole, from the beauty of the sky, the mountains, and the sea, all really working in tandem. It's not easy, but it's possible, and we just have to confront those challenges with honesty and sincerity. Did I miss anything, and would anybody like to add? Okay. Thank you. All right, well, with that endorsement, I'm going to quickly, first of all, feel free to take a break, stretch, and move back to your seat if you want. We're going to begin the expert panel discussion. I'll ask our experts to please join me up here. And part of what we want to do is, since we now have heard from you for 3 nights and had the benefit of prep with Lucien and Mihilani and so many others who generously shared and surveys before this, we did our best to answer one question. Tim, it's not advancing. Please go to the next slide. Thank you. The question that we held is how do we help you when we keep and hold the motto of the authority in mind, which is, this is really heaven on earth. How do we preserve and live up to the spirit and also empower and support Gina as a leader and all of you with ideas? So if we go to the next slide. The next slide. Okay. I'm going to ask our experts to please come up here and join me, and I'm going to begin the conversation talking about the money, because we all know that if you don't have the resources, an aspiration can sit in a drawer, and even when you have the money, the way that you think about that plan of finance can have really difficult unintended consequences if you don't center values and ask hard questions. So this is, again, reiterating our focus. Oh, okay, and Gina would like to say a few words. Okay, thank you.
I just want to acknowledge some special people that we have here. I don't know if John Stufflebeam, the Director of Water Supply, he was here listening to all your comments. He came last night too, but also Councilmember Keani Rollins Fernandez came. And Council had a busy, long day today, so the fact that you're here says a lot about your work ethic and how much you care about this community. So thank you for coming out.
Yeah, and Councilmember Fernandez, thank you for giving us also the opportunity before to support you with the housing-focused conversation. Great to meet you in person. All right, so while Tim works on the slides, picture. Peter, if you could help, we'd like to go to the slide with the aquifer. Slide 13, thank you. So you're going to see a picture of a beautiful aquifer. I want you to think, like, where is this? Why could it be important to this? And I'm going to tell you the answer because I know that we're short on time on this quiz. But this is an aquifer in Missoula, Montana, small city that certainly is not the stature and population of your own. But why they are relevant to this conversation, if we go to the next slide, please. Thanks. This is how a small city took on a financial giant and retained their most precious resource. So Missoula, Montana spent about 10 years with community-driven action, a mayor who really cared and said, I believe that our water system should be our own, and achieved that. In 2017, they were able to take a private water system that was fully privatized into the public domain and really like run it themselves. And one of the key lessons, and I won't have time to go into this given where we are on the agenda, is that is instructive to me is one, it shows you what's possible. Two, it shows you the pace at which leadership can drive change, which is incremental. So it didn't happen overnight. It took about 10 years. It shows the commitment of executive leadership being vital. But third or fourth, it also shows the key thing that I'm going to talk about today, which is financially, they had to put together like a puzzle, a bunch of different approaches and strategies, including their powers of eminent domain, including things that you do, like looking at their ability to pay for things in real time from appropriations from the general and government bank account, and couple that with also bringing in investors in a different way without the level of control that they had before. And the reason I start with that, if we go to the next slide, please, is because the freedom to do that big, bold thing can also coexist with funding a whole bunch of other community needs that you've told us are important. It's possible to do both in tandem and to advance like both strategies. And a lot of what you see on this chart are things that like beyond the water system are functional areas of investment, like investing in housing, investing in workforce development, investing in a number of areas, including like emotional grief and support for communities who feel displaced with water policies and others that are both infrastructure and operating expenses. And the question is, well, how do you do that? Where do you get the money and how do you do it responsibly so that you don't have unintended outcomes that even create, let's say, inequities where the project itself is not in that spirit? If we go to the next slide, I'm going to cover this in 3 points. First, how do you understand what public finance tools are available to you? What is the county already doing? It'll show you the second point, which is where are the scope of opportunities and things that you are not using that are really vital to this conversation that you should consider. And third, what questions should you ask, particularly in this process? If we go to the next slide, I want to make sure that we have a shared understanding of what public finance is. It's a really hard field, but if you remember that it's just about how you spend and raise money, that's it. That's really what it's about. And Phil and I had a great conversation as we were getting ready for this event. And he said, well, what if can you bring in investors differently? Like, do investors still play a role if you want a different North Star, let's say? And the answer is yes, and it's because public finance gives you the options that I believe on the next slide you'll see on this chart. Any community in America, including the county of Maui and the authority and others, basically, to fund anything fits in a square of this chart. You're either paying for things as you go, which just as if you don't use a credit card and you buy things in real time, that's what it is. Or you're using lending instruments. You're going and borrowing money from investors, but you are not giving those investors control over the system. You're just taking their money and pledging to repay. Very different arrangement than public-private partnerships, which is the next square, where you basically design, build, operate, finance, and/or maintain a system together with an investor sharing risks and also the possible rewards and gains, and with a myriad of structures that you have experience with Mahipono and others. Separate from that, land value capture, where you really look at land as the biggest resource and think, are we really leaving money on the table? Do real estate market dynamics and the way that we're thinking about land use planning support us in using land as a vehicle for reinvestment? And then there certainly is a square called other, because there's a lot of other things that could be innovative. But the edges of innovation that we want to call out on this chart is an area that we are actively working in, which is thinking about money that comes in through philanthropy. Not just to fund us as a nonprofit to be here, but philanthropy that can fund you to do work through grants that you might be familiar with, but a separate and large emerging area called program-related investments, where foundations have a whole nother balance sheet, a pot of money, to become investors in community and place differently. And if we go to the next slide, the question is, knowing that those are your options, how do you think about your resource base and decide what do you do? What do you choose and what are you leaving on the table? If we go to the next slide, you'll see that the most important pieces of the way we understand how the money flows within relation to Gina's role in the water system are captured in these 3 bullets. So first, Article 8, Chapter 19 of the revised charter really, as all of you may know, creates sort of the legal way that this, that Gina and her work are created as a department within the mayor's office. Beyond that, the enabling framework of the Department of Water Supply as a county agency, still subject to the mayor's executive management and the council's legislative oversight, crucial, right? Because you have not just one stakeholder that's in charge of water-related needs, but also a separate Department of Water Supply, each with powers that could flow through the mayor's office, which we're going to talk about are important for the way you can bring other investors in. And then lastly, this really, the piece that gets me and our team very excited about where you are in this moment in time, the power to create a regional water fund that's unique, and it creates the opportunity to shape how revenues that have been coming in and even future money that you could tap could be earmarked not just for the water system, but in a way that we challenge you to be radically imaginative about, and that I think Gina has explained in other meetings is already part of her thinking. Could the Water Authority take a leadership role in funding not just water, but things that are community benefits, like creating the breadbasket that you want? And thinking about food insecurity and other issues, which is really bold and important leadership. If we go to the next slide, this is how we would say, well, what are your revenues? What could you tap into? And if any of you have ever read the audited financials of the county, we have. It's a very long document. This is just one section of one page that would tell you, like, this is the money that comes in. On the next chart, you'll see 2 pie charts. And what these pie charts tell you is that the blue square, no, it's not a square. The blue part of the circle are money raised from taxes. It's the biggest revenue source that you are dependent on as a county. That's a good practice, and it has enabled you to do something that you saw on the circle that I showed you, which is called pay as you go. This is why the county has so much money to pay for things in real time and has not really actively thought about other financial instruments, and obviously with a caveat, but actively had to leverage other instruments beyond paying for things in real time. Second highest category are revenues that are from charges, fines, and fees. So really, there's a dependency here that becomes really important. If we go to the next slide, key questions to guide your future decisions should be, when you create this regional fund that's going to basically serve as a way to possibly pay for system operations, maintenance, as the shift in control could change, what do you want it to be? Don't take that as a given. Ask hard questions that include, is it going to be a source for funding operations and maintenance? Do you want to use that money to secure future ways to bring in investors without giving those investors a degree of control through something called municipal bonds that you saw on the chart and that I'll explain shortly? Is it going to be a source to continue doing pay-as-you-go, which could be advisable, but do you want that to be for water system improvements or for the more expansive needs that we've talked about this evening? And those are just a sample of some of the starting questions you should be thinking about. If we go to the next slide, there are risks and benefits of pay-as-you-go. Here I took a sample of just a few important things that you could say, well, if we're going to pay for things in real time, what are they? And imagine if that's just all you do. You're spending a lot of money, right, on an annual basis. You could have needs that are sitting on a back burner because you're just using the money you have. Think about your own bank account. But what if you did something different? And that's what the next slide shows you. On the right, you see like those same projects, but like what if instead of paying for everything in real time, you took some of those projects and you borrowed money through municipal bonds? What if some of those projects were funded through philanthropic social investments? You are widening the resource base, you are widening what you tap, and that gives you optionality. That's a quintessential ingredient of what Missoula had to have to move towards public ownership as one component in Lawson. If you look at the next slide, we're going to highlight, because I know Gina talked about this is an important area of priority that's being underutilized but has potential, how municipal bonds could be used, because to answer Phil's question from our wonderful conversation at 5:30 p.m., this is a way to bring in investors that are different than how you've seen investors like Mahi Pono behave and have control over the system and other parts that you might want to fund. On the next slide, you see like, well, what would it take to find an investor who reflects those characteristics? It takes 9 major things. On the next slide, please. So you just have to have the idea, right? What do you want to fund? The first row is about taking the idea and getting it through a process called authorization, making sure that it's valid under the law, and also will give the investor a tax subsidy, which is what makes municipal bonds a hugely, hugely attractive security. It's just like stocks, but basically creates a way for people to invest in you with a loan rather than owning equity in the community. The next rows of the chart I won't go into in the interest of time, but basically they show you that there's a lot of stuff that Gina and others would have to do, including convincing investors of creditworthiness, convincing investors that the method in which you want to sell the bonds will actually give you the best possible price, and then also getting to the final piece where the investors believe in you enough to close the deal, give you a lot of money on one day, and then your repayment obligation to them begins, and what you're paying them back is principal and interest over time. So it's not money for nothing, but it's a liability that has one characteristic that is really important: intergenerational equity. Think about the fact that you can drive, if you care about equitable outcomes, that as a value, not just through the project, but through the vehicle of finance that you are choosing. And if we go to the next slide, public finance decision-making is not binary. You have to ask really hard questions of saying, wait a minute, why would we shift from pay-as-you-go to doing these things called bonds or another public-private partnership if you want to continue to work with Mahi Pono or maybe others who come in? And generally you want to think like, well, what is it, and understand it? What's the cost-benefit analysis around it? And then how do you make sure that even in the plan of finance, not just the project, you are asking hard questions around the values that we've surfaced in this room are really important, and are they achievable through that whole combined approach? If we go to and your revenue base, obviously, because how will it impact you to make those promises and change and pay those back to investors, or continue to do pay as you go? Will turn upon how healthy the resource base is and how you think about it, including that enterprise fund. So other than intergenerational equity, what municipal bonds can help you do is pay for expansion projects at scale, pay for deferred maintenance, i.e. the things that you've said the system needs that nobody is paying for, because you raise money at once, and guess what? It can't be used for anything other than the purpose you choose that it's for. It's not subject to appropriation risk like happens through the legislative process. But it's not risk-free. Solvency risk, you could, if you can't pay back that security, there are some really serious consequences, and those are not to be dismissed. On the next slide, social investments and municipal bonds combined, i.e. that really unique and emerging role of foundations, presents an opportunity for you. It's an area that many governments are starting to learn about. And it basically creates, I won't go into this in the interest of time so you can hear from other experts, a way for foundations to come in and join you in that process in the market and help convince those investors who are not going to be like Mahi Pono, where they're coming in to give you resources, that they are partnering with you and that they stand behind the obligation really in a way of support. And that support can help you to get the best price in the market and really sort of create intergenerational equity, a concept that we could talk about further if we had more time. On the next slide, this is just what it can look like to do this philanthropically. I have an example of Macon-Bibb County, Georgia, on the next slide that shows how a community who was dealing with food insecurity, housing, blight, and other issues that are familiar to your own wanted to create a community-driven fund where people could actually say, hey, I have a project in mind, and I could use money to do that, and it could become micro-entrepreneurs to drive forward that change. And they did that with, similar to the resources that you have, money that came in from intergovernmental sources, i.e. grants grants from foundations, but also by bringing in a foundation as a social investor in community, particularly in the county. And there are resources at the end of the presentation that will show you how including that basically created a model for not just funding those needs on a pay-as-you-go basis, but also by using multiple tools in the tool chest and creating a wider pot of money the community could rely on to drive change. On the next slide, I'm going to now cede the rest of our time to three incredible experts that we have brought here today, because we know, especially at the Public Finance Initiative, that it's not just about having the money and asking the hard questions around values, but then having additional tools in your tool chest to think, well, how do you center Indigenous cultural practices? What can you learn from other communities? And that's going to kick off our conversation. Dr. Chief, if you could join me up here, we'll begin with your portion, and I won't.
There's a mic on the table too.
Oh, yeah, feel free if you'd like to not present from the podium. Yes.
Okay, good.
The clicker is not working though. Well, now it is. But if you could, I know that in the interest of time, we want to be respectful of everyone. I've asked each speaker to give their remarks in 7 minutes, so that way we end on time, but we are happy to stay and answer questions, but we want to make sure the meeting ends right as we promised. Dr. Chief?
Okay. Yate. Can you hear it? Yate. Shay Torchini Shledo Tohana Bashishchin. I am Bitterwater, born for near the water, and 3 of my clans are water-based. So when we talk about water is life, as an Indigenous person, you know, I really relate to that in the sense that water is critical to our livelihoods, to our identity, to our epistemologies, as well as our spirituality. And I am the director of the Indigenous Resilience Center, and there at the University of Arizona, we work with Indigenous communities to center community-based projects to address environmental challenges such as food, energy, and water challenges. And it's really important that the community is driving a lot of these initiatives because they're the ones that live there and they have the knowledges, as we have all shared here today, that those knowledges are many generations that can contribute to problem solving. And so part of that is also building up the next generation of young people who can become the leaders, who can help to do water management and assist the community in protecting the environment and the water. And so when we talk about resilience, we're thinking about the different impacts like climate change, fire, droughts, contamination. Those are things that impact our water and our environment. But how can we be more resilient to those impacts, not only now, but into the future? So we talk about climate future. Where do you want to be in, where do you want your community to be in the future? And I'm going to skip a lot of these slides, but that's talking about 7 generations. And so like our elder here today, you know, he has 100 years of knowledge that he has personally, but he also knows his grandparents, which is 3 or 4 generations before, and he's teaching his grandchildren. So that's 7 generations. So we need to think about that when we plan, we collaborate, we co-design, we use our knowledges to come up with those solutions for the 7th generation. So when you're engaged in these discussions, ask yourself, what do you want the future to look like for your children, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren? And so your knowledge is really important in that, and to be able to be more resilient and to become resilient to droughts and climate change. There are many factors that you should consider, not only like infrastructure or your demographics, but also your spiritual, cultural uses of water. And so you have to look at it holistically. And in order to look at it holistically, you need to come together to collaborate and have these ongoing discussions. And cross watershed collaboration is really important. So all the watersheds, as we discussed, are connected. They're complex. They ebb and flow into each other, groundwater, surface water, springs. And so we live in these different watersheds. And so it's really important to work together, to share information, to have cross collaborations across the watershed so that we can better plan and be more resilient into the future. And when we collect data within our watersheds, we have to remember that that data is important, but it also should be protected. And there are ethics out there regarding data protection, and one of the most well-known ones is the care and fair principles, in which the data should be findable, accessible, interoperable, reusable, but that it's also for the collective benefit. There's authority to control it, and responsibility and ethics. And for Indigenous peoples, this is very unique to cultural data and cultural protection. And as a community, as Indigenous communities, we have the right to say what information should be shared, how should it be shared, and how can it be protected. That is called Indigenous data sovereignty. But also that data can really also support your own advocacy. And in my work with Indigenous communities, I wanted to share one example where there was a lot of data extraction on the Navajo Nation, where USGS, Army Corps of Engineers, universities came in to take water measurements, but that data was taken out and never returned back to the people for their collective benefit. So the people came together and they said, let's collect all this data, partner with the university, and put it all in one place where it's accessible for the community members, and that they're able to make decisions about their water. And so in this work, when we think about watershed management, we have to think about it from a holistic perspective. What are the different uses of water? And not just for recreation, but in the case of the Navajo Nation, they use the water in 42 different ways. And everybody knew that was a given, but it hadn't ever been quantified. It hadn't ever been collected. And so through surveys that were conducted and questionnaires that were done across the communities, we were able to count 42 different ways. And that was really helpful to the people because they used this information to advocate for themselves. The Navajo Nation sued the EPA, they sued the state of New Mexico, and that data helped in their testimony because now they actually had that information. But in addition, the people decided who had access to that data and how it was managed and protected. So as you move forward in your work, remember that this is a collaborative process, and there's many tools out there, many who are going to be shared today, but also that, as scientists, we come in, we have our own scientific process of looking at the watershed, and it may be very different from what the community sees because like as my relative was sharing here, his family's been here for many generations. Imagine that knowledge that his family has, and that's really important. So when the Western scientist comes in, they have their own models, but really when you add all that knowledge together, it gives you more information and a better understanding of the watershed. And this example is from the Pyramid Lake Paiute tribe in Nevada. So I hope that was insightful for you and useful. And I really appreciate having this time. Thank you so much for inviting me to your community. It's so beautiful here, and I really had a wonderful time here.
Thank you. And next, our colleague Katie Hansen and then Andrew Simmons will each present in 5 to 6 minutes.
Yep, great. Good evening, everybody. I'm going to draw on some lessons from my work in South Africa and the Middle East and the US to try to think about, now that we've unearthed a lot of these values, what are some strategies that we can do to put them into practice, right? What are some tools and some lessons learned that might help this watershed think through how to realize the dreams we've talked about today? And there are kind of 4 main takeaways, right? We can only move at the speed of trust, that it's important to engage meaningfully as we are tonight, to address the power imbalances that exist in the watershed, and to be transparent and accountable as we go. And when we're thinking about the water management, it can often be analogized as this 3-layer cake where there are so many different stakeholders who have some small piece of the puzzle or authority to make decisions, right? There's who's happening in the county, the state has a role, individual water drainages within a broader watershed, and it can get somewhat overwhelming when we're trying to think about, we have these dreams and values that we want to see in real life. Being really clear about the decision-making framework can help start to take one step forward, right? And thinking through who has the authority and who's making the decisions that we want to influence right in an incremental way can be useful. And because there are so many stakeholders and so many decision makers, it requires the collaboration that Dr. Chief and others have talked about. And we can only collaborate, right, if we really trust each other. And so a lot of the work to do here in these community engagement meetings and in being transparent and accountable is to acknowledge that there are reasons why trust has been broken in the future and how to work together to move forward to build that trust moving forward. So meaningful engagement is important in the sense that you're all invited into this meeting. It can be quite demoralizing to be asked for input and not understand how is this input going to be used. So for Gina to start the meeting by saying we're actively working on a watershed management plan and this information that you shared tonight has been captured and will be incorporated and that Gina will report back out with her staff to you as it goes, right? Helping to support that process and hold her accountable will help you take these next steps. It can also be helpful to make it quite interactive and think into scenario-based. So this is an example from South Africa of using marbles as a representative of the water that's available and thinking through, right, if we're allocating the water amongst these different fields or different users, what does that look like? What happens if we have half as many marbles next year? So that's something to consider moving forward. To address power balances, of course, there's radically different amount of resources, knowledge, ability to participate as we're making these group decisions. And a way to think through this is, what do we need to do to acknowledge those differences and rein in onto ways that we can engage with different people that know different things or have different access to journalists, politicians, money, right, to influence the decisions that are made. And thinking into the strategic plan, which will be part of what happens moving forward, is drilling down from these overall goals into targets and tactics and resources. And then this last piece is thinking about who are your allies and opponents that can help you along the way. That can be really useful to map that out, where you think through on this x-axis, right, in terms of who's supporting you, where are your active allies, and where are the opponents that are working against you in terms of the targets and goals you're trying to accomplish, and how much power do they have, right? A low amount of power or a high amount of power, power being influence, money, decision-making authority. And then actually plotting out, right, with sticky notes in your head, right, where your allies might be on this grid, and thinking through what are the ways that you can increase the power of your allies or pull some of your opponents into a more neutral point can be one way of then thinking about, okay, what are our next steps as we try to make some steps forward towards the goals. And as you do so, right, really in continuing these practices of being honest about what steps are working and where there's more work to do, and thinking through how to set up the accountability mechanisms can be helpful. So good luck, thank you very much for having us, and I'll pass it on.
Great. And our colleague Andrew will close out with a presentation in 4 to 5 minutes that talks about a case study that is similar and germane to you.
Okay, thanks. Clock is ticking. Great to be with you. Just by background, I worked in environmental planning and as an anthropologist and cultural heritage, and living in Asia and in the UK with projects all over the world, really, but more recently with a few water utilities in the UK and in Ghana, actually, and I'll be sharing a project in Australia, the Hunter Water Utility. But before I take you, and we'll dig in just a little bit to this project in Australia's Hunter Valley, I wanted to share Hunter Water's acknowledgement of country. We acknowledge the traditional countries of the Awabako, the Darkinjung, the Jiawago, the Wonarara, and the Warami peoples. And my pronunciation actually is probably better with Hawaiian, I think, for the last few days. And the countries in which we operate and beyond where our water flows. We recognize and respect the cultural heritage, beliefs, and continuing connection to the lands and waters of its traditional custodians, and pay respect to their elders, past, present, and emerging. There's the intergenerational concept. This acknowledgement of country can be found at the beginning of nearly all of Hunter Water's reports, both for public-facing, for Hunter Water's users and communities, as well as its staff, and through its collaborations with partners, as the firm I used to work for experienced. And as we learned that this was through a lot of bottom-up engagement throughout the territory of the New South Wales area, to actually have that recognition throughout planning documents, and in this case with Hunter Water. I think I better go to the next slide, please. So Hunter Water is the name of the publicly owned water utility in Australia's state of New South Wales, which is on the East Pacific coast. And so I worked with a British NGO, environmental NGO, and engaged with Hunter Water to support its strategic planning efforts. And Katie shared some examples of what strategic planning involves. And then this is, I just wanted to give you a little taste of how that played out with this particular water utility. And we worked on Hunter Water's long-term climate resilience and adaptation scenario planning in a process that was similar to some of what Katie touched on. And Hunter Water actually has been recognized not just in Australia, but internationally as a publicly owned water utility that has robust community consultation and involvement with different community groups, and is known for just its innovative management practices, especially as it's faced the issues like drought and wildfires, or bushfires as they say there. And water utilities, even in the UK and beyond, are looking at some of Australia's water authorities like Hunter Water to learn from them as they face climate change issues. And so, although there are clear differences to the East Maui Water Authority and your communities, certainly in terms of scale, as Hunter Water serves a large metropolitan area, I think there are many transferable lessons that you might take, and I just wanted to highlight a few. Just especially with the importance of community involvement. So people like you and your neighbors, and how you engage with, whether it's the water authority or the local government, and planning meetings and such, and how this actually can inform planning decisions and as well as decision making and just ideally with different, say, cross-disciplinary engagement, so how land use decisions can be influenced and affected with decisions of watershed et cetera, so rather than having them occur in silos. And that's one of the reasons why it's good to be in multiple, wear different hats and get involved with planning meetings as well as the Water Authority, and then perhaps propose ideas for working groups that actually have representation across that, just so there is such cohesion, which otherwise might not happen. And the places where that does happen often is just through grassroots movements. If you go to the next slide, please. And I'm just about out of time, but so for Hunter Water, water security really remains a very strategic issue for the region. And although Hunter Water has significant groundwater resources, the water supplies have been really vulnerable to drought in recent years. And that actually catalyzed a lot of its strategic planning efforts to actually introduce integrated water resource management practices that we see today, rather than actually just hiring consultants to reports and then another one, and then that to actually have sort of a dynamic and ongoing process. And as Hunter Water has been going throughout this process, it convened several working groups, and I'll just conclude by just giving you a taste of some of those working groups and committees that came together to achieve its goals with a variety of types of stakeholders. And so Hunter Water directly engaged with its key customers or users, is a better way to put that, and community groups that included the water utilities customer and community advisory group, the development community, the business and industry, Aboriginal and the Torres Strait Islander peoples, community and interest groups, young people, so the future customers, social service providers, and its neighbors to its assets and infrastructure. And just so some examples of that include a dedicated community engagement hub, for example, on its website, incorporating Indigenous values and perspectives to inform its business through a reconciliation action plan, and at the you'll be provided with resources with a link to that. Tailored engagement with its users who are experiencing financial challenges. And we engaged with this when we worked with them. There was an ongoing schools and education program that ensured that they're hearing from their future users. A tone of voice program to provide a practical guide for its people to write consistent, customer-focused, and context-sensitive and community-sensitive communications, and a community water literacy program that enabled people to have deeper and richer conversations about its water future. And for that, they worked with Indigenous artists and community groups and high school students to promote a water literacy program that also had that involved a data component for its water is life motto. And if you just go to the next slide, and I'll just finish.
Yeah,
I'll just conclude
I think we'll
I'm done speaking. I just was going to have that, just so you can see that. But thank you very much.
Thank you. So as you see, there's so much more content that we can share. You will receive the slides, and we just want to thank you for your kind attention and invite Gina up to share a closing reflection.
Okay, I will give you guys to ask some questions if you have any for the speakers or any for us, or anybody wants to share any comments before we close out tonight. Yes, please. You can talk loudly, or I can.
In Hawaii, we have two sets of laws. The kingdom law and the laws. The kingdom law and the laws that we abide by. If you go to any courts in Hawaii, they don't recognize the kingdom law. So how are we, as indigenous people, could set up in a law that we own the kingdom law, and yet on the other side, they don't practice kingdom law. So this is what we faced with. Yeah, we are indigenous people. Yeah, I'm a Kanaka Maoli. Yeah, I got rights. I got rights, but yet, even though my rights, I try to maintain my rights. I find myself in jail, in jail, because I was trying to help my neighbors. Yeah. So this came underneath water, that my neighbor had a loy in a valley, but yet they took the water, they diverted the water, and there was no water for the taro. So what the plantation did was take this water on dry land, took it, make a ditch, so that you don't drop back into the kahawai where the taro grows. But yet, with all of that, we got put in jail. Yeah. So I hear all you guys, how you guys say, the seventh generation and whatnot. But yet, before anybody try to come to Hawaii and talk about the law, please study Kanaka law. That is the first law in Hawaii. I don't think they know it. I thank you.
Thank you for sharing your comments with us. Did I see anybody else had a question or? We'll get to you, don't worry.
Yeah, my name's David. I have questions around this idea of foundations and their money and where that's going to lead. I think that, in other developing countries, we've seen where there's public-private partnerships, countries get in debt, like with the IMF loaning money and stuff, in structural adjustment programs. So my worry is around, these are foundations that have gotten a lot of the money from the top 1%, and what are their agendas? And a lot of that is embedded in, and also the people who are going to receive, the government's going to receive that money, they may end up changing their values or orienting towards where the money is going to come from. So that's my concern, in giving up some power and the risk of getting into debt.
Yeah, no, it's a good concern, and I appreciate that you are interrogating and asking all the right questions. We ask those same questions too, and part of what you want to do before proceeding with any foundation is, one, understand where does their money come from, similar to the questions I asked you about the county. Ask what are the values and what projects are they funding and where are they moving the needle, because we could look at a number of projects from foundations and actually say, what did that actually do in place? And not just the IMF, but even if you look at World Bank funded projects and others that include grants, and where you don't just reach the intended outcome, but you have unintended outcomes that are not what communities need. The way that we approach the work is to be really radically honest about who we accept money from and who we don't. There are many projects that we turn down, and for various reasons, but part of what I encourage you to do as a community is to be very clear about what matters and to interrogate and ask, how are your partners behaving in the field? Because one thing you can do is look at what are foundations funding, what do those projects look like, who are the stakeholders they are empowering to sit on a power map with their resources, and are those the partners that you would like to see at the table sharing ideas or being part of the ecosystem of the work that you're in a portfolio with. You can also identify foundations who specifically have a local connection and understand the issues from a place-based lens rather than a national foundation who might come in and need to really understand your local context, if that also is a value that matters. And there it's about really being discerning with your partnerships. And if you think about an example of why that matters, think about the history with Mahipono. And when you look at the history, hindsight is 2020, right? You say, what happened here? Think about the questions you would ask differently. If you could go back in time and think, what would have mattered for me to know about this partner? But I really appreciate you raising it. It's questions that we asked too. Does that answer your question? Great. Others?
Aloha. My comments and questions are more for the county representatives. So the first thing is for me is when we talk about water and vai and our ahupua'a, especially as Kanaka Maoli, it's always the lineal descendants that should be coming first and those needs. Because again, our kupuna were pushed off the lands. Our waters were taken from our kupuna. And so when other people start coming in to want water, and our needs haven't been met as Kanaka Maoli, and that needs to be addressed first. I hear a lot about infrastructure and maintaining infrastructure and developing infrastructure. Are we talking about the traditional infrastructure, which is the streams, and maintaining the streams, or are we talking about the ditch systems that are taking water away from the streams and going into town, and all these settlements that are popping up everywhere, again, that are not majority Kanaka Maoli, and not lineal descendants, and don't have the water rights. The water rights are for the Kanaka first. We have kingdom laws, like Uncle said. We have state laws that protect our rights, all these things. And so my question more is, with the modern infrastructure, is where is the conversation on the county level as far as taking the actions for eminent domain of the delivery systems in order to restore the streams? And if that conversation has happened, what is the projected date that will be happening?
There's different ways to acquire the rights to the water. There's a lot of state land that's involved. And just like Lucienne was saying earlier, the state can assign their rights also. And we haven't gotten far enough to get to the question of eminent domain, except for as we looked at this idea and we recognize it as a tool. It's actually in the charter amendment that sets up the water authority, that is a tool that can be used, that the water authority can use. So thank you. Thank you for coming out too. I remember with the water use and development plan, those same questions about meeting community needs were discussed, and the answer wasn't great, but it's an important discussion, and we hope to continue to be a part of it. The other piece about infrastructure are the awais too. It's not just the system that's feeding the water, it's a system that's also going right into the communities. We can do Jocelyn, and then we also have Moki over there too. So.
Might seem like a broken record, but we got to really talk about the history of Hawaii. And I'm glad that we have Indigenous here that can better understand and have that clarification. We live in an occupied nation. We are in a state of war. United States came in and illegally occupied our nation and still continue to do so. So it sometimes hurts the ears when you hear about Hawaii state rights. The state has these rights to do certain things. And yet the people who actually hold those rights are almost invisible in the room. Yeah? And we don't look at water as a commodity. It's a responsibility. So what Kaneali'i is talking about, we already have a water system. It's there. It's empty right now because it's been diverted. And like a lot of these posters here, people are asking questions, where is it going? I heard a lot of reference to Mahipono. We had no real input in that. It was a private transaction that happened. We had commentary, maybe some recommendation, but bottom line is whoever's got the money and whoever has the promises that they're going to fulfill, Mahipono is still waiting to see if they're actually going to have water. And A&B is going to fight tooth and nail, because if not, they got to pay them back millions of dollars from their purchase. And in the meantime, the people are going like, what about us? And now it becomes pushed even further back because of this private transaction. And thank goodness we have some representation in government that speaks for the people, but we really don't have political will here. And that's key. although it's kind of a misnomer because it's based on an illegal action. But when you look at the water code, at the very bottom, 174C, anything that is decided for our water cannot diminish nor extinguish the indigenous rights. But that's never carried out. Never. Anything that they do with our water has always either diminished or extinguished our access to water. So they violate their code every day. Every day. It's in the code. So even if we went to the state and treated them as legitimate, they don't even follow their own laws. Thank goodness we have Gina that is trying to push this initiative, our own local community that is willing to participate, to push this initiative through. But without the political will and with the private monies out there, we are up against, and that's where the cynicism comes in. Who are we going to get money from? What do they expect back? You know? We're up against life and death.
Thank you for sharing. As usual, you've nailed many things. Moki, did you want to make a comment? I saw your hand earlier.
Yeah, short and sweet.
Please.
Mahalo to the balls up there. Right on. Hey, I was just wondering, since you had this meeting in the different areas, what was the number one, I would say, you know, everything's about water, but what have you come to a conclusion that number one topic for all of this, if you had any, what would you say to the questions that was asked you through all the areas that you went to? What would be the number one kind of topic? Well, we know it was water, but in your own feeling, Manao.
Yeah, no, Gina asked me to comment on behalf of the group, but the number one concern is the degree of control of the water system that is appropriate to continue as private, and how and whether that should shift and the path forward for that. Because that seems at the crux of the issues of displacement, the issues of maintenance of the system, and also the future of how it is funded, and also the level of community control and community benefit that it can yield. And does anyone disagree or want to add anything? Okay. Lucien?
The system does not generate water, the watershed generates water. So no matter who controls the system, if we're not all working to help the watershed, we're just fighting over less and less water. And it would be better to grow water and fight less.
Yeah.
We did hear that.
And Tiffany, can you give her the mic, please?
Oh, sorry. Just said it would be better to grow more water, care for those watersheds, step up to our kuleana. Every single entity that is benefiting from that water has a kuleana to help that watershed, to help it revive. Uncle Jimmy said it. We need to revive our ecosystems. They're depleted. And water does not come from pipes. Water comes from trees and forests and ecosystems. So we just got to remember that. And of course, it would be better to have public control that's based on the best knowledge and the deepest knowledge possible. I mean, that is a recipe for success rather than failure. And so it's what we must dream and work towards.
Thank you, Lucien. And everybody's watching us. The other communities, Lahaina, Navaeha, and the rest of the state too. So thank you guys for all the work that you guys do.
Tiffany, up here.
I'm trying to figure out how to word this, but it feels like one of the main issues with our East Maui water historically, from the plantation days all the way up until today, has been diversion. And part of my intention of coming to this meeting is trying to figure out like who you guys are and where you're at. So in the beginning you had said, or whenever I walked in, but you had said, we're in talks with Mahipono. They are, not to like boil things down and make it too simple, but essentially the villain as well as A and B. So what is the possibility, or is it even realistic that the East Maui Water Authority could actually help us to get our water back in our community and stop all of this diversion? Because, for example, like all of that land, like by Paia and Kihei, and you know, where it's just dry, but they're growing plenty food. That's not where the water is naturally running. So how do we get the water back like where it belongs? And is that something that you guys can realistically help us with?
Well, I'll tell you, there is a path forward, and a couple years ago, I don't think we would have even thought that we could have a county department that had a mission to obtain local control and local management. How it works is the state, CWRM, does set in-stream flow standards, but with local control and local allocation, we can make decisions for the water beyond those public trust uses. We don't have to just do the minimum. And the thing that really strikes me, and I know our board members, is the current system is, and then the public trust is water in its natural state, cultural uses, Department of Hawaiian Homelands, drinking water. It doesn't have to just be the minimum. So with local control, community input, we can decide what that allocation is, and we can have a voice in the larger conversations about growth and about housing. We can't necessarily make decisions on that, but we can amplify your voice there and try to bring it to you to educate you on it. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's what I see our role is. But we need your help, though, with the political will as we go to the state. There is a path, but they have to be willing, and in order to be willing, they need to know that you want it and you're there. So we'll get with you as we go back to the state for that. I saw Nick, and then I saw Ellen has something back there, too. Is everybody okay with the time? I know we're past where Haiku normally.
We're on Maui time.
Okay, I just see. Okay. Thanks, Tim, for staying.
So first I want to acknowledge Joycelyn, Moki. Maybe he has something to say. Radar, come here. So I'm going back a little bit, and it seems a little bit superfluous, because what was just said is so much more important, but it's part of the discussion, and I wanted to go back when you talked about financing. And it occurs to me, and especially during the budget hearings with the county, just Maui County, including Lanai, has 3 or 4 of the wealthiest human beings on the planet. The state, if we include Kauai and others, have probably a half a dozen of the wealthiest people in the country as far as a resource for financing. And yet I really want to acknowledge that talking about money and buying things when it's an occupied state and occupied nation and what we're dealing with there. So just on the financing, I just want to mention that, how that can be accessed. I know, and I don't want to get into the political things about tier property taxes or rewriting our legislation that if someone comes here and they're a billionaire, then somehow they have to share with this community, like the rest of us share whatever we have. And so I know after all those comments, it seems a little bit absurd to talk about that, but that's what stimulated my thought is that, you know, these guys come here, they buy a couple of 100 acres or some pristine, they get, like the one that lives up in Coolin gets her own, you know, road, you know, and then the rest of us have to deal with what we're given. So just want to plant that seed somehow to come up with a way legally, because then we're dealing not only with the real law of Hawaii, but then the occupied national United States government laws. So what's legal, what's constitutional, and of course, we've learned that what's in the Constitution doesn't have to be followed by federal government, so. Thank you.
Sorry. Just a couple things in case people didn't already know. We did, the water department, I work for the water department, hi. We did submit a request to the State Water Commission to revise the in-stream flow standards and to give us more guidance on how much water those streams need. And in preparing that, we did rely heavily on some of the work by Maui and others who, have looked at traditional uses in the streams. And so that's one thing, like, I don't know, I haven't seen it on their website yet. It went in like back in January or first week February-ish, but that should be in process somewhere. And the other thing, I don't want to make any excuses or say that everything has always been correct or right, but I do want to at least provide some perspective just because, you can tell I'm pretty old and I've been away from the water department for 14 years, but I have like more than 20 years in the water department collectively. And one thing about this equity, it's a very difficult question. We have this question is, first of all, is every lot entitled to at least 1 5/8" meter? That's a whole nother question, actually. What I wanted to get to was last night in Kula, and I heard kind of the beginnings of that with Nick's comments. I don't know if others have commented on this, that it seems very unequitable that wealthy people come from far away and they can afford to make these improvements that local families cannot make. And I just want to, and again, this is not to make any kind of excuses for the water department, but in order to help local families initially, and we're talking decades ago, maybe 50 years ago, a decision was made that for the first home plus ohana on a lot, to help people have their own homes, no water improvements had to be made, right? So what that meant was the water department was kind of absorbing the cost, and this is even from before my time there, was absorbing the costs of the system. So what you have these long stretches of substandard system, where it's 2 inches just to get to just to hook up, when the fire protection needs are actually more for like 6 inches or 8 inches, right? And so now what you have is like, instead of just, it's just a few lots away, it's miles and miles of system inadequacy. And then the question becomes like, we're also required to be like, we don't have a for-profit motive. We're not supposed to be for-profit, but we are also required to be fiscally sound based on our own rates and revenues. We have received some general funds, but usually most of our budget comes from our own rates and fees. And that's how it's supposed to be, that the water can support itself. And so some of the system inadequacy that you're seeing like broadly now came from what was initially intended by decision makers before my time even, to make it easier for local families to have homes. But it kind of went on long enough without, and this is where I think your enterprise fund idea, that's something that I wish we had looked more into, and there were people who wanted to do that decades ago already. That just never happened. So, okay, I'm gonna stop babbling now, but I wanted to give that perspective in case anyone didn't realize that.
Okay. Thank you, Ellen, I appreciate it. Any other wrap up? Raina, we got one more over here, Tiffany.
I just quickly wanted to ask if there's anything we can do to help speed up the process for you.
Great question. Sign up on our mailing list so that when something, what happens with the state is they post it on an agenda 6 days before. Because their meetings are on Fridays, they normally post early evening Fridays. which makes it really hard to, I'm trained now to look when the agendas come out, but it really makes it hard to get the word out to people. Thank God for Sierra Club and Lucienne, but if you give me your email on there, well, first of all, we'll send a newsletter once we get all this engagement out, but it would allow me to get to you to let you know what's happening. And I don't know, 6 days is just not enough. So if you can stay engaged, that would help tremendously. And talk to your council members. Keani stays really involved, but not all of them do. So if you see them around, let them know how important it is to you that we get the funding we need and that they stand up for Maui people. I'm just going to wrap up then and say thank you so much. You guys just fed me this evening, and that's what makes my job. And, yeah, thank you. Thanks. Thank you, Haiku Community Association. I'll try to get back, and we'll try to get with you, too, with information about the engagement that happened with the 3 different communities. So thanks. Good evening. Hui ho. Oh, and thank you, PFI. Oh, my God, they've been so instrumental, too. So a big hand for them helping us. Yeah.